And we are really honored to have one of the two principal competition to our show, the leader of Hitting Left with the Klonsky brothers, which is on Lumpen radio on Fridays. The one, the only Fred Klonsky, an educator, activist, political analyst. He's going to talk a little bit. We'll see what he talks about, but we're going to ask him questions about pensions, charters, his show, and lots more.
We're not in competition.
I know. I just
Let's tell him that every single time, Fred.
Of an alternative community of broadcasters.
Amen.
Exactly.
Amen.
And we're spreading across
Spreading slowly, but spreading.
There are a few shows.
Chirp Radio just got permission to build a broadcast tower this week after 10 years.
Ooh.
So we are spreading indeed.
No, in fact, you guys are our inspiration and model.
Right
Well,
on.
I
We're
like
the
hearing
flagship
that.
show, man. We're the oldest people here.
Well,
That helps when you're in a college station. You stick around long enough, you outlive everybody.
Well, Fred, I know that you, a lot of us watch every day to see what you post. You put up a blog that is really wonderful. You're on top of a lot of issues. You also, you have a teacher's pension, and you took off with your wife recently, and you just, I didn't know if you'd make it back in time for the show. You went to where?
but I don't just have a teacher's pension.
You earned it.
I earned it and then had to fight for it.
You still fight for it.
When they try to take it away, and and it turns out that we're still fighting for it. They don't, they keep coming back at it.
Well, while you still have it.
Who was the guy? Who was the bank robber who asked why he robs banks? He says that's where the money is. That's our pension system, and so they keep coming for it because that's
Where the money
that's
is.
where the money is. Even though they haven't paid into it for 70 years the way they should, and it's only 40% funded, it's still billions of dollars, and the banks, they got their eye on that money.
Well, you've been a valiant fighter for the pension, the rights of the pensioners. But I know you need to take a break. So where did you just go, and what did
we
you
went
do?
to Ann and I and her sister. We do a trip every other year together. And this year we went to the Azores, and we told friends that we were going to the Azores,
And they didn't know where it was.
And nobody knew where it was. This all started because actually we wanted to go to the Galapagos.
That was another direction.
That was the opposite direction.
I know where the Azores
But
are.
I did this bad thing. I read an article in Scientific American. This is like a couple years ago when we first started talking about it, and this article said that the policies of the Ecuadorian government towards the Galapagos, they own it, was really resulting in killing the golden goose that was bringing tourists to the island, because for years they didn't allow people to actually stay on the island.
Right.
And all that's changed now. They're building hotels on the Galapagos there. And the article in Scientific American said that they thought the tipping point would be the summer of 2017. And I told the family, I said, I can't possibly, I said, I may not be the actual one who's going to kill the Galapagos Islands and the turtles and all the things you find there, but I can't,
I don't want to be.
We can't, I could just see arriving and then all the confetti shoots up and go, you're our 4 millionth customer, and you've killed the turtles. And so we couldn't do it. So the interesting thing is that the Azores, which are owned by the Portuguese, it's an autonomous region, about 900 miles off the coast of Portugal in the middle of the Atlantic. Half of it's on the North American shelf, the other part of it is on the European shelf. And Charles Darwin stopped there on his way back from North Carolina. So it's not quite as sexy, but it's really beautiful, and it's full of kind of geothermal bubbling streams and volcanic
Yeah, but what are the
eruptions.
politics of the Azores? Are they trying to get independence from?
Well, I was.
What's the deal?
No, they're not. Well, there's no interest. They view themselves as Azorians, and there was no indigenous population before Europeans arrived. There are a lot of different Europeans came there were Flemish and French and Spanish and Portuguese. But for the last 400 years, it's mainly been owned by the Portuguese. And but the population, if you check their DNA, it's a big mishmash of things. And there's large numbers of Azorians who have left the Azores and have come here. So if you go around Fall River, around Boston, around rural stomping grounds.
Well, they got a lot of Portuguese up there.
But
too.
they're specifically Azorians, and in California. So there's actually more.
Azorians.
This may be
Off
more
the
about
island.
the Azores than anybody listening to your program wants to know. But there are more now more Azorians living in the U.S. than in the Azores. And so when you fly there on what must be the world's oldest passenger airline, I mean, the bathrooms have ashtrays in them and are kind of held together by tape. And you fly there, but the airplane, the flight is filled with families of Azorians that are going home to see their folks, you know. And so it's a really interesting place.
Speaking as an Irish person, when you come from an island, there are generally more of you elsewhere than on the island.
Yeah.
But that's all I'll say about that.
Island diasporas exist everywhere.
Yeah.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland on 88.7 FM, and that was Fred Klonsky last, and Katie Hogan, and my co-host Michael James. I'm Tom Clark, and we're talking with this blogger about all things in the world. I'd like to move from the Azores back to this state budget and school funding formula thing. We got
the real stuff.
They're so closely related that you would be amazed at how easy a transition it is to go from the Azores. So which one, the school budget or the budget?
Well, we got a budget passed, but we didn't get the school formula passed, and in the middle of all that, which you've already raised, is the pension thing still isn't fixed.
Well, let's talk about the budget a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think we were all pleased that money is now flowing back to the social services, and that the governor, really his turnaround agenda is kind of, at least for the time being, in tatters. But within that budget, which was a surprise to me, was a change in the pension system, and it was kind of hidden in there. And except those who voted for it, even the good guys who voted for it, knew it was in there, and didn't bother to tell anybody that it was in there. So what the legislature did in passing, in overriding the governor's veto, which I'm glad they did, they included a change which established, without getting too much into the weeds, because
The weeds
even my closest friends, even members of my family, when I begin to talk about pensions, their eyes start to roll back in their head.
I just did it.
And suddenly has to go clean her office upstairs, and I'm left alone with my ukulele. So I don't want to get too weedy about it, but in 2010, they changed the public pension system in the state, and they created a second tier. And so for teachers in Illinois who got hired after January 1st of 2011, they're paying the same thing I paid, roughly 9% into a pension system, but their pension will only have a value of the equivalent of 6% of that. They're paying 3 to 4% into a pension system that they will never, ever see. And it's basically propping up my pension. I mean, when you talk about a Ponzi scheme, this is a Ponzi scheme.
Wow.
And there was a good possibility that those teachers who were hired, if they actually worked till they were 67, which was also the change in the law. Now you have to imagine a teacher coming out of college, 22, are they really going to work till they're 67 teaching in a classroom? Not likely. So you have large numbers of teachers who are funding the pension system but will never see their pension. And even if they do, it's likely that it doesn't meet the requirements of the federal government, what they call safe harbor. In other words, the state pension they receive doesn't even meet the minimum requirements of Social Security. And so the state will be on the hook for billions of dollars.
So teachers still don't pay into Social Security?
No.
What?
No, not in this state. Not in 14 states. And they don't. And if they did, like me, I worked and paid into Social Security before I became a teacher. I don't see most of that. They don't. They take. I only get when I turn 70 because I've delayed it. I'll get $200 a month from Social Security, and I paid into Social Security for 15 years before I started teaching. So there's all these problems at work. But I want to get back to the budget. So what they did to solve this problem about the second tier that they created was to create a third tier. And so now teachers being hired can choose between having that 9% go into a defined benefit system, which is what I get. In other words, I get a guaranteed pension, and that pension is increased 3% a year, compounded, for as long as I live, which is really something every retired person ought to.
Sounds hallelujah-like to me.
Yeah, that's a good system, and it ought to be a system that every working person ought to have. But what they've done is they've taken this tier 3 and they've said to tier 2 teachers and new teachers, that you can take 4% of this and put this in what's called a defined contribution system. Now check this out. A defined contribution system is like you putting money into a 401k. Maybe it'll earn you some money when you retire, and maybe it won't. And there's no guarantee of what you're going to get. It's worse than a Ponzi scheme. It's basically going to Vegas and putting your money on a crap table. So they're taking that. So teachers have the option of taking that 4% and contributing and putting it into a defined contribution system, and have that 4% then replaced by the local school district. So now the money that the local school district had to pay for programs and for teachers and right now is going into the pension system. This local school districts only paid a small amount of teacher pension before. It was supposed to come from the state. Madigan always wanted to shift the cost of the pensions from the state to the local school districts, and now he's got that, at least for new teachers. So this all went on behind closed doors in the dark of night, and then hidden into the budget bill that got passed, and nobody knew. The first time I heard about it was when the teacher retirement system sent out an email blast 48 hours after the budget was passed. So when I contacted my own state legislator, Will Guzzardi, our friend Daniel Viss, about it, they all said, well, we had to pass a bill. But the fact is, this is really a hurt on.
And ironically, isn't this part of what Ronner's been trying to do?
It's what Ronner's been trying to do, and what Madigan's. This is where the two of them have kind of have a common interest. That Madigan always wanted to shift the pension costs.
I would contend that one reason why Ronner and others like him have so much fun going after unions is that the way organized labor leadership in particular gets framed are these huge salaries and then a huge pension afterwards.
Yeah.
As you just kind of more gently put it, every worker should have a pension like this after they've worked to 65 or 70, with more and more of us working past 65. And yet I think lots of people who don't have this kind of pension are envious or jealous, and therefore don't want to support a fair pension for workers who don't get Social Security.
No,
and somehow that case never gets made.
No, you're absolutely right. I joke about being able to travel, on a teacher's. I mean, this is what my brother said. We were on the radio yesterday. How come you get to go? And I said, I got a teacher pension. But of course, that was the contract in the deal I made when I first got hired.
When you left the steel mills.
When I left the steel mills, and that was pretty good. We had a pretty good pension in those days too. So what used to exist in the private sector and has been stolen from them is only really left. The only place you can find that now is in the public sector, and they're going after that too. You're absolutely right. What I have is what I earned, and I'm not ashamed. I wasn't ashamed of my salary, and I'm not ashamed. I earned it. I'm not ashamed of my pension.
I'm sure you were a good teacher.
And I was a good teacher, and I'm a good retiree too. I always tell people I found the job I have the perfect skill set for. But the reality is, the morality is that all working people ought to have a pension, live a life of comfort, and without worrying about health care, and without worrying about where they're going to live.
Cradle to the grave.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's what a humane system looks like.
Humane.
Is to treat your old folks with dignity and with honor, and to make sure that they live a good life. And so what I get, I think, it's like we used to say about students in our classroom. What I want for my kids is what I want for all kids. They're all my kids. And I say, and I feel that way about retirees too, and people who work their whole lives. What I have, everyone should have. And there was an article in the New York Times this week. I think it was on Wednesday. The story of the Memphis sanitation workers. There's only 14 sanitation workers who were on strike when Martin Luther King went down to Memphis in '68. There's only 4 and was assassinated. Only 14 of them are still alive. And they had a story in the New York Times about one of them who's 85 years old and is still working as a sanitation worker in Memphis for 63 years. And they just worked out a deal where the survivors get $50,000 apiece because they had no pension. They
Jesus.
had no. this is what Martin Luther King went down and died for, and 50 years later, they're getting 14 of them are getting 50 grand, a one-time payment of $50,000, because what they're getting from Social Security, which they didn't get until the strike, is so small that they can't live on it. This is shockingly shameful.
As a retiree, moving beyond your self-interest, what do you propose we do to get real revenue reform in the state that would not have us going to regressive taxes every time? The soda pop tax was approved today. We'll talk about that next week. What should we be looking at? Because all we really did to fix this current budget thing was to raise a fixed rate income tax that's really unfair,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and broaden the sales tax base, which is really unfair
Regressive.
and regressive. So how
No,
do we
we've
get
talked
out of
about
this
we've talked about this before. I know
Yeah.
I've been here and talked about it before.
Yeah.
This is not rocket science. The problem in Illinois is fundamentally a revenue problem. That the richest people, the Ken Griffins and the Pritzkers in the state, they pay exactly the same rate of income tax as you and I do. Well, retirees are exempt on this, but hard
Quit
working.
lording it over us, would you?
What's that?
Quit lording it over us, would
Sorry,
you?
I'm happy. Listen, I'm a happy man. But
He is one happy
and I
retiree.
and I already said I want this for you.
Yes.
I want-
I want it for me.
But the fact that anyway, it's not rocket science. We need to, and interestingly, all the Democrats running for governor. I don't know about jury, but I don't know what his position is on all this. But I know all the major Democrats. The thing that I complain about them is nothing makes any individual one of them kind of stand out. But on this question, on a fair tax system, they all seem to be in favor of a system in which if you earn more, you pay a higher rate, and if you don't raise it, you can't fund the state by putting the main tax burden on poor folks, because they don't have any money. If you want to raise money, you have to get it from the people
Who have it.
Who have it, and so we need a graduated, progressive tax system that in which if you're rich, you have a greater responsibility to fund it. And so anyway, so it's not, to me, it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple.
I'm going to go to the next question here because I'm going to go to the next question.
It's your show.
It is our show. Gentrification, hot battleground in California, but I feel like it's a hot battleground emerging in my own neighborhood again. But in California, where housing costs twice the nation's, why is there not more pushback here? I see pushback, but I'm reading different blogs.
Pushback by who? This is the mayor's plan.
This is the mayor's plan.
But there was a story, I think, was it in the New York Times yesterday, really talked about pushback in California over high rents everywhere. And some real estate guy who happened to be talking to said, yeah, this younger generation, they're not buying places, but they're willing to pay high rents, so they're building these big high rises in a lot of places.
This is our neighborhood too, in Logan Square. I've been there 45 years. I'm like I need a grandfather's pass to get in, if you're not 22. But so we have a house that we couldn't afford if we had to buy it now. But this is a citywide. It's a national problem, but it's certainly a city problem. But it's a city problem because the mayor wants it. The mayor and the mayor before him are responsible for a policy that has driven out almost 300,000 African American people from the city, because the jobs, those industrial jobs where folks work are gone,
and their schools were closed, and nothing was done about it.
Exactly. When I came to Chicago, Katie, back in '73, and you all were here, so every neighborhood had a factory, it had a neighborhood school, it had a bar, it had a church, and now the factories are gone, the schools are. The mayor closed. The mayor just a couple years ago closed 50. He's closing another one. We had some guests on our show yesterday from the National Teachers Academy. It's 70% of the students are African American from schools that came from schools that the mayor had already closed, and out of the blue, they read in DNA Info. This is where they found out about it. They read in DNA Info that they're closing their school. That the mayor's closing another African American school.
Unfathomable. It's really
So
incredible.
this is the gentrification and the school closings and our loss of an industrial base and the attack on public employee union. This is all part of it. This is an attempt to turn the city, all our cities, into Paris's where the rich live in the city and the poor live
Wherever.
somewhere else.
Wherever.
And we don't have to know where.
And we don't have to put trains to get them into the city.
How is the radio show going? What kind of an audience have you attracted?
Well, I have no idea. You know, it's a funny thing. I don't know. Do you guys?
Oh, sure. We have all kind of
You have rating
systems to find
services?
out how many we have. Yeah.
We have no idea.
Yeah, and the fan mail is just great.
Listen, we're having a good time doing it, and we know we have listeners, because they contact us. And,
My big question is that restaurant Kimsky, which is Polish Korean,
Oh,
is that
man.
open in the day when your show is on?
I don't know what time. I don't know what time they open. I have eaten there, and you should too.
I want to.
This is a mashup of Korean and Polish food. Ed Mazurki is one of the backers of kind of the co-prosperity.
Yeah, it's the guy who runs your station. Right?
It's a nonprofit, low power, as they say, community station.
Lower power than us.
In fact, we're having a. But we're not. Can we plug things on here?
Yeah, you
we're not
can.
allowed
Yeah.
to plug things on our show. I don't know.
Well,
But we are. We're having a Labor Day bash on Monday, Labor Day. We're going to be on the air live for 2 hours and have food and music, and people should come down and make a donation and help support the station, because really the funding it's all that kind of funding, It's not, so anyway, yeah, people should come and join us. But the show is great fun. My brother and I. We've known each other for a while, but we've never really worked. Believe it or not, we've never really worked together on a common project.
Yeah, but you did work together in the same political party.
No, absolutely. But he usually told me what to do. Which, by the way, he
still does.
What I decided was that it's kind of like putting IKEA furniture together with your spouse. It's best just for one person to decide what to do. Don't try and do it collaboratively. Just tell me, and that's kind of the way we do the show. Michael just tells me, and I
Oh, bologna sausage. Fred, this is a treat to have you on.
Well,
Always
thanks for
it's a
asking,
treat to have you on. And
Next time you bring your ukulele.
I'll be glad.
Okay, well, we're coming up with some live music here at the Live from the Heartland show.
Can I stay in here?
You can stay in here and
Sing
you
along.
can't stay in here.
No, I understand.
But
You
can
won't
stay
let me
in-
sing along, is
Listen,
that- no?
you can sing along. We always
As long as
sing
I'm in
along.
the other room.
As long as you're about a block away. No. Can't wait to spend a little more summer with you, Fred Klonsky. Shine on.